I'm Marty Owings, and this is Capital Conversations for February 26th, 2013. Welcome to the program, and glad that you could join us tonight. I'm happy to welcome in Representative Sondra Erickson in her 7th term. She hails from Princeton, Minnesota, and represents District 15A, I believe.
Correct.
Yep, and a former English teacher.
I am that. I'm very proud of that, yes.
We were just discussing the demise of cursive writing, and it's, well, we're amazed at why would you do away with that, right?
Well, Marty, if you and I have our way, there will be no demise of cursive writing.
Right, exactly.
I think we need to get out there and remind parents and teachers and whoever is doing this national research that the formulation of an idea from the mind to the tool to the paper is essential to really good development of thinking and articulation of an idea.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad you could join us tonight. Well, I guess we should get right into it. The governor released his budget about a month ago. It's continues to get some reaction up here, but there's also been some movement on some bipartisan items. What parts of the governor's budget are you working on with Democrats, and what do you expect would be easier to get done than maybe some other things?
Well, really the only, I shouldn't say the only, because I will be working on the tax bill as well, but primarily now is the education piece. And,
which
and I'm a member of
right.
both the K-12 Finance Committee and the Education Policy Committee.
Exactly.
So in education finance, he has proposals that I think are workable. I mean, I don't dislike his education proposals, but it seems to me that it's almost a gimmick again, because I'll just give you one example. When I first served, I was one of the co-sponsors of gifted and talented revenue to go to each school district per child. And we increased that over the years because we knew that we were servicing special education, we were servicing students who had special needs, and what were we doing for our students who needed to be accelerated and pushed, who didn't choose to take some post-secondary education very early in their schooling. So the governor takes that and rolls it into the general education formula. Nevertheless, in law, even though the first stipulation in law that will be repealed with this is that a pull-out program for gifted and talented would go away, would have to go away because there wouldn't be gifted and talented special funding. Mm-hmm. But a third provision is that districts still have to provide for acceleration for their gifted and talented students, whom they may or may not identify, but we must provide for that. And that was a very important part that I carried in legislation with former Representative Alice Seagren. So, that roll-in, I know, makes it look like there's more funding going to education. Nevertheless, it also denies, I think, school districts from continuing in programs that they have found to be very successful to address the needs of gifted and talented.
Well, it would occur to me that education is one of those areas where the partisanship wouldn't play such a big role, that there'd be more. I mean, I think everybody agrees that it's great to educate the kids. Head Start's probably a good program, getting kids. You're familiar with this because you worked in the education system. You were a teacher for many years, so you were able to be engaged with kids who got an early start, and that made a difference, right?
Yes.
Now, that's not a partisan issue. K-12 funding shouldn't be a partisan issue, and yet you find yourselves divided. Where are those particular divisions for you in your mind? I mean, apart from the governor's.
Well, I think I kind of led off negatively, and I didn't intend to do that. Positively, putting dollars on the formula that helps all students is so important, and the governor does do that. He has $52 of new money that will be placed on the formula, and that would be for all students. He also has
How far does $52 go? Is it 52 million, you mean, or is it per student? Are you talking about
it's $52 per student.
Gotcha,
yes.
Gotcha, okay.
And usually that would be approximately 52 million as well, because for every dollar it's about $1 million. of increase.
Ooh,
so
that's
that
a clean
is,
correlation,
yes,
I guess.
So that, that certainly helps. And districts like that, where we're having a little disagreement, and sometimes it can be greater, is that in campaigns, the majority party said they were going to pay back the shift because they crucified folks like me for borrowing from school funding to balance the budget. But now it appears that the majority party is not going to pay back the shift, and the governor is not going to pay back the shift until 2017. So we're having a little bit of disagreement about that, even though House File 1 is supposed to be paying back the school shift. So I think, overall we agree that we want a well-educated population, K-12, even pre-K, but it's where we put the dollars that we sometimes have disagreements.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about some ways that schools are innovating, and if there's any translation to, with the advent, we were just lamenting the demise of cursive writing, or the attempted demise of it, but there's some things that technology is doing that's pretty interesting. For instance, MIT is now offering free classes to anyone. You don't get any credit for them, but many of the major universities in the United States, if you can get on the internet, you can take a class or whatnot. Some local schools are already doing that. And what about technology as it pertains to K-12 education and how that can help enable our students? What are your thoughts on that?
A policy that we have that's been in effect now for at least 2 years is allowing school districts flexibility as to how they use different funding streams within their budget. And that, I think, has propelled districts to create technology at a higher level. So maybe the purchase of iPads, I think that's very good. Different kinds of learning years, different programming, and I'll point to Irondale High School that now has a program whereby you can earn an accreditation degree, a 2-year degree, by combining courses in career technology, as we call it, and regular classwork, and leave Irondale High School with 2 years of college behind you and this associate's degree, more or less.
No.
I mean, that's just an amazing accomplishment. But it's really in the hands of the locals, and what they do is they take the dollars that we send them and they use them.
Is that where it belongs? Sorry to interrupt you, but is that where it belongs?
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
In your mind? All right.
Yes, absolutely. Local control. So send the dollars to the locals and let them come up with their innovative ideas, whether it's directly related to technology or to career technical or some other area. Because STEM is another important area, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Right.
And we've kind of wayed away from it.
There.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so any way that a school district can get its students interested, motivated, and learning in those 4 areas is ever so important. But I say leave it at the local level and let them take the dollars we send them. And of course that comes through the general education formula, and use those, and then give them flexibility to use mandated areas to create these programs. And we did provide mandate relief in the last biennium, and I know that districts are very pleased with that.
Do you find that the ideas that, when you bring these ideas up to folks who generally aren't educators, who maybe haven't walked in your shoes, what kind of reception do they get? Are they surprised?
Parents are very grateful for any kind of flexibility they have at the local level. I hear this from them, well, not so much this year, because I'm not the chair of policy this year, but last year and the year before, repeated thank you and gratitude for allowing their districts to strike out on their own and try something new and different. Maybe work together with another district in an area. It doesn't have to be in isolation. It doesn't have to be a silo. We allow flexibility between school buildings, school districts, and area districts.
Sure. Well, let me ask you about where you stand on a couple other things here as we wrap up the education part and move into something else. But what about the idea of summer school? Does it have a place in modern society? Year-round school, where are you at on that?
Well, the governor is, just to give you a baseline, the governor is taking the extended time, which is an additional 0.2% of funding for the high school student, and rolling it in again to the general education funding. And it's extended time that has allowed us to provide for summer school for those students who are behind. So that's one part of the program, providing for students who have lost credits or not earned credits, and that's a summer school program. But to have year-round school is a dream of mine. To have flexibility for a district to perhaps have 45 days, and I'll just give you an example, 45 days in the classroom, and then maybe a 2-week break, and then another 45 days, or 50, whatever the district determines, or districts, and then another break, and then another segment of learning. Because we know that in K-12, the more often a child is learning, the better they're going to retain.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens now, and I noticed this in my classroom, was when the students return after their summer break,
mm-hmm.
it's almost a 2-week review in English, of course,
mm-hmm.
a 2-week review of basic usage, basic grammar, basic organization and writing, before we can really launch into the next area of learning that they're supposed to be at. Let's say it's a 9th grader, and I have to review 8th grade skills, so that puts us behind. So I'm a strong supporter of flexibility for locals, and if they want year-round learning, I support that. But again, I want it to be a local decision, and I want us to provide funding so they can do that.
Sure. Well, what about disparity in graduation rates as we look across the folks of color in the communities? You know, you've got a big disparity in graduation between, especially the African American community and white kids in rural Minnesota, things like that. What can be done to address that, and then what, if anything, are you seeing the legislature this year trying to deal with that? I mean, it seems like we've upped the ante so much with the constant testing and all this scoring that we're doing, and it almost requires the year-round education you mentioned, but what do we do about disparity?
Well, first of all, testing is required by the state only one time. So all the other testing is self-imposed. If a district wants to use diagnostic testing, or a district wants to use other kinds of testing, those are all self-imposed. So the state requires only one test, and that's, of course, to comply with No Child Left Behind.
Talking about the MEAs.
Yes, the MCAs,
right?
the Minnesota
right.
Comprehensive Assessment, and then we have a grad test. But in response to the achievement gap,
Yeah.
we need, of course, an attentive student, one who's in school. We need effective teachers, and we need involved parents. And we've been failing in all 3 areas, apparently, to have this gap widen. But I have hope that we will focus more specifically on learning, teaching and learning, through our teacher evaluation, through our principal evaluation, through some of the changes even that the commissioner was able to receive in a waiver, so that, you know, we do focus on growth, we focus on proficiency, which is absolutely where we need to get, and then we do focus on graduation rate. So she designed her waiver application to the Department of Education in such a way that we hope that we're moving students who are in this disparity gap forward, and that at least we're going to see growth, and eventually we're going to see them at proficiency levels. But it takes students, parents, and teachers to all work together to accomplish that. And you know, I hope we're getting there. Instead of focusing on race or culture, I hope we're focusing on teaching and learning.
Well,
that's essential.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned, I want to touch on one of those 3. You know, the easiest one is maybe the teacher piece. What about alternative licensure? I know it came up, and it's been, it depends on who's carrying the bill, but it seems to be popular with one side or the other, depending on what's going on. What do you make of that?
Well, the alternative pathway to licensure was bipartisan. In fact, as chair of the committee, I heard Representative Mariani's bill first before I heard Representative Garofalo's bill, and I really did like Representative Mariani's approach to this alternative pathway, because it did bring in teachers of color and communities of color to a greater extent. But I have to say this, we passed the legislation. The Board of Teaching has not yet been able to complete all of the steps necessary to ensure that there are college programs out there offering this.
And
so
yet
we're
they're
lagging
desperate
behind,
for these people
and
in
we
the
are
classroom.
desperate.
Yeah.
Yes, we are, and we're desperate for teachers of color.
Right.
You know, let's get them in and going down that pathway. It could be a parent, for Pete's sake, who has a degree and who wants to teach. And oh yes, I agree with you. We've got to get moving on that. And you know, our licensure area is so convoluted. And God bless the Board of Teaching, I once served on it. But we have gone to such a great degree of requiring this course and this step and that step before a teacher can get licensed, that this alternative pathway is really, you know, like a godsend. So let's use it.
Well, and you used to get teachers in the classroom that were passionate about their subject matter, which, you know, inspired lots of us to go on to whatever degree we pursued.
Exactly.
Shame on my history teacher in junior high. You inspired me, and I went and got a history degree.
Good for you.
Yeah, well, in some ways it is absolutely good.
History is always important to the development of the brain, because without being able to understand history, we do not know where the future may go.
That's right. History's mysteries, as we call it. Okay, let me hit you with a couple other things before we wrap up here. Sunday liquor sales. Boy, we go right from education to drinking. You know, we got the bordering state, they're like inviting people over, come on over and drink with us at Wisconsin. That should be their new state slogan. But what do we do about, is there going to be any movement on this Sunday? That comes up all the time.
Oh, I think there will be movement this go-around, although I don't support the sale of liquor on Sunday. And most of that is because I live in rural Minnesota and I don't live next to a border.
Right.
And my folks in our municipal liquor store in Princeton and in Mora and in Malacca, which is basically my legislative area, do not support that.
Yeah.
And my small liquor stores that are you know, not municipals, they do not either. I don't think we need to go there. But, you know, I'm not in the majority, so I'm not sure what the majority's thinking. And I know I have some minority colleagues who like Sunday sales, so we'll see. But I think it'll have some movement.
I forgot to ask you on the education side, can you explain to viewers and folks out there that don't know what cross-subsidies are? What is that?
A cross-subsidy in special education is the state allowing school districts, or first of all, giving them additional funding, or then allowing within the general fund budget of a school district to cover costs of special education students that are not met in the regular special ed funding. So it's a crossover.
Right.
In a sense, it's, what's an easy way to explain it? It's additional, it's funding that you take from your general fund to cross over into special education to pay for those costs not covered.
I see.
But the governor has recommended additional funding, and I think that's a good idea.
Fantastic.
Our special education is growing, so it's good.
Speaking of kids, what about unionizing daycares? Where do you stand on that, and where do you see that headed? It came up, was defeated last year, or there was, you know, conversation about it, didn't go anywhere. What about this year?
I don't support unionizing daycares. I just had ASME people in my office today giving me this 2-page test, and that was one of the questions that came up, and lo and behold, one of Princeton High School's former students, who was my catcher when I played slow-pitch softball back in the 80s, she came into my office, and this is her campaign to get daycares to agree to consider unionization.
Yeah.
But the daycares in East Central Minnesota, and we're a more conservative area, don't want to go down this path, if I may call it a path. They want that freedom, especially the small in-home daycare. I would say the centers maybe have a different view, not so much in rural Minnesota, though, where I live and represent. But that government intrusion, because they already have a lot of government intrusion. I don't know if you've ever looked at the rules that the Health Department and Department of Human Services have promulgated to require of these daycare providers. They just throw up their hands and say, we don't need one more thing, and I'm not sure a union would protect me anyway. So, but it's probably going to move.
Any questions from the internet? Nothing right now? Nothing tonight. Yeah, that's right. What about, finally, a question for you. Should we be subsidizing the Mayo Clinic and their new facilities? We do it for ballparks. We do it for other public facilities. Where are you at on that?
Well, I would have to say initially I don't support the $500 million, but it's an interesting question that you ask, because Mayo competes with the great medical centers in Cleveland. It competes with the medical center at Johns Hopkins, and I know we have other major medical centers across the nation that are providing a climate for those who seek to come to a fine facility like Johns Hopkins or Mayo. And so I think Rochester in rural Minnesota, because it basically is rural Minnesota, it's a regional center in rural Minnesota, is feeling that they don't have the infrastructure in place. So I think it'll be an interesting debate. You know, it's bonding dollars, but it's really a TIF. And so I wish we would approach it as tax incremental financing, because that's really what it is. It's really not bonding, and I think there's a misconception. So, you know, I'm waiting for tax committee, property tax committee, to hear the bill, because I want to know what is this about, because the increment is going to be used for further development in Rochester, and I don't oppose that. You're so right. This is a provision that has been, I think, miscommunicated. And so, you know, I'm going to wait to hear the details, because I want Mayo to remain a stellar place for whomever wants to come for medical services. And I know the competition is getting greater. So, you know, I'll wait, but $500 million in bonding, I wouldn't support.
Well, we appreciate your time tonight. I understand you're very busy, so we'll let you get back to the important work you're doing. And it was just very nice to visit with you tonight and hear some of your thoughts about different things going on up here at the legislature. I hope you can be our go-to person for education stuff, because you seem very well-versed, Representative Erickson, on these subjects.
Well, thank you. And I think a service like yours is so important to our constituency, because they learn firsthand from a legislator and from a good interviewer like you, Marty, about what's going on. And you know, we have to communicate to the people, because
feels good
they think that, you know, we're some odd group that doesn't want to tell them what's going on. So, you know, ask hard questions like you know, you didn't ask me too many hard questions, but you could have asked me, because I prepped for a few other things that the list said.
Well,
that I didn't hear in committee. You didn't throw any of those tough questions at me.
The reason I didn't is because, frankly, we invited a Democrat always on the show to be with the Republican.
And I would have loved that.
Yeah, and unfortunately tonight the Democrats were otherwise occupied, so they couldn't make it. The entire House caucus was busy. So just a reminder to them to come on.
Thank you. This was very enjoyable.
Appreciate your time tonight. We'd like to thank our guest, of course, GOP State Representative Sondra Erickson. You can look her up on the Minnesota Legislature website and just search under lawmakers. You'll find her there. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at MinCap News and on Facebook at Minnesota Capitol Conversations. We'll be right back after this short message, when we'll be joined by Mr. Fott, Eric Fott. Be right back after this.